time to talk music, audio gear, and anything else that crosses our minds. I'm Mark.
And I'm Peter.
And welcome to the Hurton Audio Podcast.
So, this is a big weekend for albums coming out, or should I say Friday in particular. We've got like new Bon Jovi, new Charlie XCX, new, I believe Royal Republic's out today, which we've been talking about on the run-up to as well. And then a load of new songs, like songs by Porter Robinson again, and all that. There's just quite a lot coming out, and I think it got us thinking about how some people have quite a high tolerance for new music and discovering stuff, and some people, we might all have seen these people or had a conversation with a friend who's like, yeah, I don't do new music, and you're like, what do you mean by new music? And they're like, well, the craziest one I've seen, and I think James Acaster had a similar take on this, didn't he?
Yeah, he just said 1 year, didn't he?
Yeah.
That was the year of music.
After a set year, it's like, it's over. I'm not going forward anymore. And that, to me, is like, that's insane.
I think the notion of being happy with what you have is like a good notion, like philosophically, right? But I do think to deprive yourself of listening to all music that comes out in the future is like a really interesting sort of argument to say, well, I objectively think that there is no music that will ever come out that will be better than the music I currently like, which is sort of the stance that some people have.
It's quite a common music journalist or musicology sort of quote, is because they're like, well, it comes down to almost the Shakespeare and monkeys thing, doesn't it, really? The argument is you've got, 50 years, probably now it's like 75 years of contemporary modern music. If we're going from around the 50s.
I think the best way to classify modern music is like when vinyl started to be bought by teenagers in like the 50s in America.
Yeah, that's why I'm thinking
that's when it got commercial, because obviously you had like records in the 30s and 40s, but it wasn't like popular.
If you take some of the records from the 50s, and particularly, I mean, as soon as you hit 60, it is definitely, inarguably, contemporary music, I would say. But in the 50s, a lot of the staples from people like Elvis, and I think even if you go to a lot of the crooners like Frank Sinatra and Bing Crosby and stuff, a lot of that remained like key in popular culture, and to some degrees it still is very important to artists who are coming out now to a certain degree. So that's why I think that is contemporary music, and that's discarding like a couple of people who was in there early, particularly like the early blues guys and the earlier sort of, I mean, there's so much like swing and all that, which is very similar. But I think, like you said, when kids started going out and buying vinyl, that ultimately is when it became like popular music and contemporary music.
Yeah. So
I think it's crazy to think that you could just say, with that body of work between every artist and all mediums, I'm done. Everybody making music, you can stop. We got it. I think we've got it. That is a crazy take to me.
I mean, one thing, and lots of people have said this about the saturation of music. Obviously, the way you can consume music is a lot faster, but also a lot more immediate. And there's probably more songs that come out a day now than that will have come out in the entire of the 50s. I won't say 60s, because I feel like there's a lot of music that come out in the 60s. So, but did 80,000 songs come out in the 60s?
I mean, oh my God, we'd have to go on to
because that is the argument. Because they say like Spotify said on certain weeks it's like 100,000 new songs, and obviously, who you listen to is at your discretion. But there's no way to listen to them all. So what do you pick and choose from? And that a lot of people pick and choose what is popular, which narrows it down. Some people don't like listening to popular music, so they listen to only underground bands and stuff. So it all depends like on your mindset.
And if you watch I can't remember which specific documentaries they talk about, when they talk about people buying records in the 50s and the 60s, and probably to some degree, although each year it will have gotten less like this, you know, there wasn't a lot of choice. It'd be like, right, there's like 3 new singles out this week. And it's like, well, I best go get, you know, if you're really, really into music, like a lot of them, I think I'm thinking of like bands, probably somebody akin to the Rolling Stones or the Beatles, where they're like, we had to go get the new like American blues music. And there's like 3 new records out this week or this month or something.
But that's the other thing, like you're not even filtered down to your nation's releases. You know, you just get a worldwide lens immediately.
Yeah.
So if it was, right, here's the top 40 just from the UK or just from, I mean, obviously the UK puts out a lot of music, other countries don't. So then it's like that's how certain people get more popular. And obviously, if you have a policy like France does, where they champion their nation's artists like 50-50 on the radio, you know, you're actually more likely to break out in France to an extent, you know, because you've got like somebody curating and like your sort of chances.
Just in terms of French artists who have like broken out into the global market, I mean, I feel like France does have quite a lot of artists. Although I think we have found the more you actually start paying attention to where people are from, the more you're like, oh no, there is like a big global presence in music. A lot of people tend to sing in English, with some obvious exceptions, but I think it is a bit more of a globalist industry now in that sense, which is nice because I think, you know, I mean, we always talk about Swedish melodic rock, I mean, and how good that is. And there's a reason why everybody needs like equal opportunity in music, because, you know, I think it isn't so much that any nation has better music than others, but definitely some people are more forward in terms of what is progressive music, and some nations definitely like want to do like stuff that's a bit older. But it depends when genres and like stuff hit certain countries, because it's, you know, I mean, look at the blues in England. If you go right back to the British invasion, you know, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones were trying to play catch up the entire time. If you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean though, because obviously when you was looking at like having to physically ship records from one country to another and looking at demands and that, you typically only got local stuff or stuff that they thought would sell, you know, like in each retrospective country. And that's why I mean, like, you're competing not with everybody in your record store, but with just everybody all the time, which I think is what makes discovering new music really hard.
Yeah.
You know, it's easier and harder because you have to do a lot more filtering yourself. But like when we was growing up, you could just walk into HMV, sort of like before Spotify was popular, and that you just had to pick an album. Obviously there was LimeWire and things like that, and you could listen to any song on YouTube, but like when it come to buying a CD, before a lot of the online shops really got into gear, you know, you'd just have to look at the album covers and say, oh, what do I want to buy in this shop right now? And that was your choice. And that's sort of what I'm getting at with like New Music Friday is like a gargantuan thing every Friday. And it is relentlessly every Friday.
It didn't used to be like that, because, I mean, they changed it. Well, they didn't change it, but music is traditionally like now marketed for Friday, I suppose, to kick off the weekend was quite a while. Well, you know, not even that long ago. It was just music comes out when it comes out, and, it, you know, you have your midweek chart and all that. I think you still do, really. But what I was going to say is, before like the algorithmic way of doing New Music Friday and having all these artists that, you know, you can follow or subscribe to on whatever platform you're on, and have them like, you know, ping off on your phone or whatever to say, look, this person you like or this band you like has new music that you might like. You know, before, like you say, you had to walk into a shop and you'd be like, oh yeah, that's cool, I'll pick that up. Or you had to like troll YouTube or something and find it. I mean, I know you could subscribe to people on YouTube and it would work very similar, but that's providing the bands are organised, which some bands aren't. You know, some bands aren't going to update their YouTube channel in time, and I still see them here and there. Bands like Extreme come to mind, where you go on the YouTube channel. Obviously, for the new album, it is very, very up to date, but there's just black holes where there's nothing like uploaded for like 5 to 10 years on some channels.
Yeah. But it is fun to keep up with music, and I definitely think like there's a lot of cool music coming out, and you've got to just be searching for them in your own way. Like for me, it's all about just taking chances on certain artists, looking at certain scenes, and then I typically find a lot of music I like from similar artists, which is a feature that Spotify is apparently going to scrap, which hopefully they don't. And also just featurings. Like, it sounds so silly, but if you listen to a song and you like, say, the vocalist who's featuring on it, you can check out that band, and that's an easy way to find people. Compilation albums I've always struggled with to get into, like, everybody on the compilation album. There has to be some kind of like hook for me that makes me get into like an artist or a band. Like, for me, I'm either not in or all in.
Yeah, and I think that is like it depends what sort of person you are. Some people go for the song. So they'll be like, I really like this song, and that's going to go in my playlist. And other people are like, I like this artist or band, and whatever they put out. And I think this is definitely something you can say applies to, like, you know, the fan bases, say like Taylor Swift fans, or to like the Army and the Beehive and all that. If I'm getting all the names exactly right, you know, it's like, look, we're here for the artist, and whatever they put out, we're going to get behind, or at least give it like. You know, give it a shot, give it like a full playthrough and try to like it, you know, because I do that definitely with a lot of the artists that I'm a fan of. I will listen to new albums by some acts, and I can't think of any that come to mind immediately, where you get the album, you put it on, you go, oh, this is weird, like, I don't know how I feel about this, but then a couple of listens in, you're like, no, I do really like this. But maybe if it was not an artist that you was already a fan of, you may not have gone past that first listen.
Yeah, and I do think like it's a game of attention. Like, how long can artists hold your attention for, and then how do they go about doing that? Because Taylor Swift obviously is a great example because of the sheer output she's had. So she very much can keep people's attention, but at what point do some people fall off because it's too much? And then you have bands, you know, that don't release anything for 5 years, and then that's like, well, I was interested, and now you've come round 5 years later, I'm no longer interested, I've moved on.
That's a very, very tough thing to like quantify, but I think I would have thought everybody would have bands or artists that they've had that for, where they've been really excited about an artist and they've just taken so long to get around to releasing new material that either it was like a bit of a phase, like in that act, or you've just you're in a different place mentally, and when that sequel comes out, you're like, well, I'm not feeling it as much now, whereas like a year or two ago I would have like loved it. That's the thing.
Yeah, and I think some people I think more people listen to a lot more genres and styles of music, which then it depends on how committed you are to each genre retrospectively, because some people are just like, right, forget everything that I used to listen to, I'm just listening to K-pop now. And that is my identity, you know, and that is fair play if you want to do that. But, you know, some people mix and match. Some people just really commit to just one thing or one artist occasionally.
Yeah. And then if that artist releases, like, in your opinion, a bit of a dud, is that something that's going to make you change tactics? Are you going to think, well, no, I don't like this artist as much? You know, I thought it was very interesting with Bon Jovi talking about legacy and the idea of, can he make an album that can live up to the legacy of Bon Jovi? Or, you know, would he make an album and then say, this isn't going to live up to the legacy? Say, for example, if it didn't, in his mind, and say, you know what, that's it, Bon Jovi's over. Because that's sort of the theme of the documentary.
You see, good thing for John Bon Jovi, right, is if he made the album and he was like, oh, and all the people around him was like, oh, I don't know, he could have just put it out as a solo album.
Yeah, he does have that flexibility.
He could have done that because he has done it before. But obviously he was trying to make a Bon Jovi project, and he did, thankfully. Because like we say, new music for us, we love new music. I'd rather bands keep going than retire. I find it's hard when you've got a band you really, really like and they just say, we're done.
Yeah. I also find it fascinating with Bon Jovi because they're constantly in a different space. Like the songs that I've heard, and I haven't heard the full album yet, but I've heard a couple of songs off Forever. They're not occupying the like cliche Bon Jovi or even the new cliche Bon Jovi. Like I feel like they are doing stuff differently. There's some Bon Jovi tropes in there, but that's why you listen to Bon Jovi. You expect some of the themes, like the writing themes, to be there. But I was going to say it's really interesting. Like when I clicked on the credits for We Made It Look Easy, and I saw Ryan Tedder's name, I thought that's so interesting. I couldn't tell if he was singing backing vocals or not on the song, but it's like it's interesting to hear a world where Bon Jovi and like One Republic are so somewhat like colliding.
And also, John Bon Jovi this week has said that the main thing he wants to hear is the Killers' new song. Like, he is all about the Killers. And obviously, he's covered Mr. Brightside before as John Bon Jovi. So he is excited. That's like, I don't know, because it was out of context. He's just talking about, like, what he's waiting for in music is the Killers' next project.
Oh, that's some pressure on Brandon and the gang, isn't it? Really, that's so. I hope they put. I mean, I was disappointed when the Killers sort of semi-shelved their most recent project. That's what they did.
Because we like the single Spirit in particular.
Spirit's really good. Great. I mean, all three of them songs,
Boy and
This Side of Town. I believe.
Yeah, This Side of Town.
All three of them songs, like they cover different sort of areas of what an album would have been like. I would have been really, really curious to hear what the other 7 songs that potentially have been shelved would have been, or whether maybe they'd done 3 and they liked 3 and then the next couple didn't get off the ground and they said we're going to move past it because maybe Boy was out a long, long time, so they might have just thought it's going to be still. But saying that, One Republic's announced their album, and the majority of the songs that are speculated to be on the album are out and have been out for some time. So it's like, at what point... And again, this is a trend. I'll just dive into this because I saw Fallen in Reverse have got an album coming out with Popular Monster on. I mean, that song came out a long time ago. I mean, could you just look to see when Popular Monster actually came out? It's definitely been out since 2020 at least, because we listened to it in 2020. I'm sure. And then obviously as well, I really like Galantis.
2019,
and that's on a brand new album. You see, this is the thing. There's like a pattern emerged, and I've only clocked this recently because Galantis has done the same thing. Because I really like Galantis, and they've released like 7 or 8 singles, and then there's an album coming out, and it's got like 13 songs. I'm like, 8 of them are already out there, and that's it. It's a logical progression to sort of putting out a string of singles and then having like a final, I was going to say final destination, a final like destination for the songs. And it makes sense because then you can match it up, you can print your vinyl on your CDs and you still get your consistent releases. But then your album's like, well, I mean, can they go platinum before they even get announced?
The only thing with that approach, I think, is fair, but it's not as like... it's not as like immediate for, say, the fan base in like not the way you'd think, because the only problem you have when they put out lots and lots of singles and then start to cherry pick the ones that they felt was received well, and it sort of shapes the album without them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then it's not like this is a body of work that we made at one time and this is how we think we should sound now. Here's 10 songs. It's like, well, we've cherry picked what people liked for the last 2 years and then put 2 extra songs on it.
Yeah, that maybe matched the vibe, but
then it doesn't come across as like an artistic endeavor. It comes across as more like a
crowd pleaser.
A crowd pleaser, which isn't wrong.
It's
I get it, but do you know what I mean? Like, there's that sort of.
Well, I was going to say the Charlie Puth thing of him doing all of his songs based off TikTok reactions on his newest album. If you remember that.
I hate the thought of that.
The songs like Light Switch, I think, depends what type of music you like, but I think you can't argue with a song like Light Switch. It's hooky. It's definitely got the viral like thing going as well with it, like the sound effects. But, would he have put that Light Switch sound in if he didn't ask his audience? Because I'm sure that was one of the questions that he asked in the TikTok. I think somebody had said, I could be wrong, I thought somebody had said that, put the Light Switch sound in as like a hook, or maybe he did, because he does do a lot of found sound stuff, does Charlie Puth. To his credit, he is a very good producer as well. But, as you say, that's less from the mind of Charlie Puth and more from the collective mind of him and his audience, like with the participation. But that's not to say that, you know, bands back in the day didn't test stuff out on the road, engage the reaction a similar way.
I suppose the difference is now you can just find every little detail, so there's no mystery in it. Whereas if somebody said, yeah, I saw Motley Crue and they said we're going to do this thing on the new song and the crowd booed and then they changed it, you would have to take the word for it.
Yes,
because you wasn't there. There's no proof. There's no cameras or anything to prove that happened. So it'd just be like lost to legend, you know, among the fans that was there.
Yeah, you'd only know if you know. And I think it's really interesting for that, just diving into that tangent of like concert stuff and things being, you know, a unique experience for the people there. Bleachers, I've seen on their tour, they're doing airdrops. So if you're in the audience and presumably you have to have an Apple phone. I don't know how airdrops work in that sense, but you get like a live track from that, I'm assuming from that night, airdrop to your phone at the end of the gig if you stay behind or whatever, however it works. But obviously everybody's like, well, I got mine from my show, so I want to get the rest. So they're all like, there's like an online effort to collate them all. So they're all, and they're giving them away, so they're not charging. So I'm assuming that they're all like good to share. But they've sort of made like 10 up already online. But that sort of takes away from that. I was there, so I have this memento. And then with the digital stuff, that memento just gets collated online, and then everybody, like, I've downloaded them all, and I haven't got tickets to see Bleachers, although I wish I could. It's just not worked out for me.
And the other thing, like when we're talking about discovering music and people sort of like retreating from modern music into what they find comfortable, is this is like in the UK, you know, it's known as like transitioning from BBC Radio 1 to BBC Radio 2. So once you get fed up of popular music and like the chart music, you go, okay, I've been in Radio 1 territory for far too long. And this happens to the actual bands as well.
Yeah,
or the artists,
and the DJs as well.
And the DJs. And they go, I'm too old. It's time for Radio 2. It's like a slow transition that people go to at different times, depending on how much you can put up with the new music zeitgeist and what people are championing in the UK, which is really funny because there's like people in the UK will know what I mean when it's like, right, well, you're on Radio 2, you know.
Yeah, some people just,
so
it's not even a choice.
With new music, you know. Yeah. And what I find really cool, like when we talked about Bon Jovi, that, you know, wanting to hear new music from the Killers, is obviously a lot of people never stop discovering new music, and why would you? But I definitely think, like, when you think about films and stuff, they always portray like the grandparents to still be listening to gramophones and stuff.
Yeah, they do, yeah.
Well, I think that culture maybe has changed a little bit for most people, but I mean, you know, everybody's got their own thing, but obviously then there's people like James Acaster that say, well, no, I'm never listening. I wonder if he's stuck to that. I need to...
No, he does music now though, doesn't he? I'm sure he does music.
Yeah, but does he listen to music?
I'm presuming
I would have to look into it. I don't know enough about him.
If you make music at a certain point, and I'm going to bring Tom Schultz into this, at a certain point you have to listen to new music because you're making new music. And Tom Schultz famously said that, and was this in relation to a copyright dispute?
It's from Boston, Tom Schultz, if you are unaware.
Yeah, so Tom Schultz said that he hasn't listened to any new music past 1980 or something. That was around the quote.
Absolutely ridiculous.
And it was like, you've heard it though in airports, right? And he was like, well, I don't really listen, because I couldn't remember if it's because somebody said that something off the more recent, is it called Life, Love, Hope?
Yeah.
I didn't know if it was because something off that album somebody thought sounded similar.
This is your problem with this argument from Tom Schultz, right? Because on Corporate America, which nobody can listen to because it's very hard to find, right? Yes, Tom Schultz wasn't listening to new music, right? But when Frank Cosmo comes in and half the album sounds like Oasis, you're going, well, somebody in the band's listening to new music, whether Tom Schultz is aware of it or not.
And then the problem is, if you don't listen to new music, you like, say, in an example, Frank Cosmo's really into Oasis.
He's like, let's just rip off Wonderwall.
He's like, let's do something that's like adult contemporary or Britpop. And Tom Schultz goes, this is fresh. It's like, yeah, it is fresh to you because you don't listen to new music. But then
Bear
at
in
what
mind
point?
that corporate America was by far like maybe 5 years out of that Britpop movement by the time it came out.
What was it? 2002.
Yeah, but Britpop has long sailed by the end of the 90s.
It's sort of peaked, hadn't it, and was on the downhill, I think, if I'm remembering it right. But
Oasis was still going at that point. I think, yeah, because it was 2008 where they stopped. But what I mean is, like they had the heyday in like the 90s.
But the thing is, if you don't listen to music and like you say you're working with artists in your own band that are listening to new music, you have no way of saying either, oh, that sounds too familiar maybe, or that's not what we do, for example, in Boston's case. So I do think that is a very funny example. But then at what point, like, how would you not have music shown to you? Because I think, anybody who number one, going out, all it is music.
I think where people like Tom Schultz go wrong, the opposite of Bon Jovi, I suppose, is that their work is music. So they're like, this is work. I'm never going to listen to music again unless I'm making it. And it's that sort of mindset. Whereas, a lot of people are like, well, I want to be I want to discover music. I want to know what's popular. I want to know, like in the case of people like Bon Jovi, they're like, I want to know what my kids are listening to. Like Dave Grohl's always talk about Billie Eilish because his children have shown him Billie Eilish and stuff. So it's like there's that part of it,
I think there's also two minds of, I believe Tom Scholes doesn't listen to new music to preserve his sort of musicality. So when he makes music as Boston, when we all get treated to that once every decade or 2 decades album, it still sounds like Boston, providing the other members of the band haven't changed it.
Which they haven't really stuck to anyway on the last 2 albums, I would argue.
And we are Boston fans, I will like to add.
You're not a Boston fan. So you are a Boston fan if you've even listened to the last 2 albums.
Yeah. Whereas bands like Bon Jovi, Bon Jovi, I would say throughout their entire career, and this is like a tough one because some people do complain that Bon Jovi do the same stuff, but they really don't. If you listen through their albums, they are moving, and be it some album to albums, they have more of a successor cycle than they do a complete reinvention. They are constantly moving sonically, be it slow at certain points. I think in like the 2010s and the early 2000s, there was a slow movement, but they never really go back and say, we're doing You Give Love a Bad Name
and
again.
This is where you end up with like the new fans versus old fans with a lot of the old artists. It's like, if you change style of music, how many old fans do you drop for new fans do you gain? And the other thing, like with legacy bands like Bon Jovi, is a lot of the old fans are going to call them has-beens anyway. So it doesn't matter what they do. So they might as well just do what they want to do instead of pandering to people who are going to say they're has-beens. Because, it's like we say, with new music by artists, they either get put in a box and say, well, you're doing AC/DC, you just sound the same with every record. And unfortunately, AC/DC are great. They do their own thing. But a lot of people just say every song by AC/DC sounds the same.
Yeah.
Because they have the cliches and the things that they do. Yeah. Or you can do what Paul Robinson's doing, where he changes his style on every album and people just hate him for it. Half his audience love it and half the audience hates it. Because but then nobody can agree where he peaked, because some people are saying, oh, well, it's not as good as Nature as the new album. Some people are saying it's not as good as Worlds, but Paul Robinson has alluded to on Instagram and stuff that people still want him to do Spitfire EP. So it's like, what do? You can't do it all at the same time. And if you do, reinvent that sound, people are going to say, well, it doesn't sound like the Spitfire EP anyway, so why even bother? Because you can't cater towards the masses like that.
And also as soon as you have to pander to that degree, you are in a losing battle. And I was going to say, regarding Bon Jovi again, it's interesting that they've had Talkbox on one of their new songs, but even though they've put the Talkbox in it doesn't sound exactly the same as Living on a Prayer or any of the other Talkbox tracks. And it's the same with people like Paul Robinson. Just because he's moving styles doesn't mean he's not there anymore. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it still sounds... I mean, you listen to a song like Language, and as soon as it hits that vocal, like, middle section, I'm like, this still sounds like current day Paul Robinson. You know, the synths are slightly different, and the overall feel of the way that song drops is very of the time, but the actual melodic structure of that song... That's still what Paul Robinson's doing. You know, it may be dressed different, but it's still the same stuff.
Because even if you change styles, typically a lot of people don't change their sensibilities, like with what they like to hear and what they don't like to hear. But yeah, discovering new music is as easy as it is hard, and I think trying to like new music can be exhausting at times. And you do see a lot of people say music fell off, you know, like in general, like you see so many people just say the chart music, and when they say chart music, they just mean everything.
I think as soon as you say the chart or current music isn't for me, you've already stopped trying. Like you're just painting everybody with the same brush, and you're not actually really, you know, listening.
Yeah, and I suppose that depends on what you think with production and all that, but, you know, do you still listen to the same music, or do you listen to new music and stick with the times?
Or both. I think both has become like a big category of people like, I really dig like Pina Colada song, and then being like, but Charlie XCX's new album's Ace. It's like, you could do both.
See, we sort of like are in the middle, because we have a lot of like classic rock playlists and stuff where, and albums on CD and stuff where you're like, I want to go back to this album, but then you know, happy to listen to everything on New Music Friday and buy new music anyway, dependent on the mood that you're in. But yeah, that's been our thoughts on more. It's a bit like a sequel to the Discovering New Music episode we did.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks for listening, everybody. See you next week.